This is the human skeleton. In the human skeleton, there are two skeletons. There is the axial skeleton, which includes the head, the thoracic cage, and the spine, and the appendicular skeleton, which includes the appendages, the arms and legs. I will specifically be talking about the pectoral girdle. Here is the scapula. This is the scapular spine. It helps us identify structures such as the supraspinatus fossa above the spine and the infraspinatus fossa below the spine. You can also see the subscapular notch here, although it is more visible on this side of the drawing. This is the acromion, and this is the coracoid process. Here is the glenoid fossa. Together, these make the glenoid cavity, where the head of the humerus will fit in. We can identify this as a right scapula because the scapular spine is always on the back, and the lateral border is this way, where the glenoid fossa is, where the humerus will fit in. Therefore, this is the medial border, and therefore, this is the right scapula. Moving on, there is the clavicle. Here is the acromial end of the clavicle where it will articulate on the acromion of the scapula. Here is the sternal end that will articulate with the manubrium of the sternum. This bump right here is the conoid tubercle. Here is the humerus. This is the head of the humerus that will fit into the glenoid cavity. Here is the greater tubercle, and here is the lesser tubercle. And of course, between the tubercles is the intertubercular sulcus. Here is the neck of the head, of the humerus, because the neck always follows after the head. However, this is specifically the anatomical neck. The humerus has a surgical neck because you are more likely to break your bone here, and therefore you would have to have surgery there. Here is the deltoid tuberosity, where the deltoid muscle of your shoulder will insert and abduct your arm when contracted. This is the trochlea and the capitulum, also known as the medial condyle and the lateral condyle. Above them, of course, is the medial epicondyle and the lateral epicondyle. This is the coronoid fossa, where the coronoid will fit in order to touch your hand to your shoulder. This is the olecranon fossa, where the olecranon will fit in and allow you to extend your arm. Here is the ulna and the radius. On the ulna is the olecranon, the trochlear notch, and the coronoid. This helps us identify the anterior view of the ulna because the notch is visible. This is where the trochlear notch and the trochlea of the humerus articulate to create a hinge joint, which is your elbow, and allows you to extend your arm. Here is the radial fossa right here between the ulna and the radius that allows you to pivot the radius and the bones cross so that you can pronate and supinate your arm. Here is the head of the radius. The head of the radius can be identified by the fact that when you look from a superior view, it will look like a circle. So, like a radius, like a circle, because there is a radius in a circle. Of course, the neck follows the head, and here's the radial tuberosity, where the biceps brachii will insert and flex your arm when contracted. The ulna and the radius have a styloid process that articulate with your wrist bones. And finally, here is the hand. We have the phalanges, the metacarpals, and the carpals. The carpals are your wrist bones, and they each have their own name. Here is the scaphoid, the lunate, the pisiform, the triquetrum, the hamate, the capitate, the trapezoid, and the trapezium. You've learned there is a mnemonic that you can use to memorize the bones of the wrist. Some like to play hardcore table tennis. Some like to play hardcore table tennis. Oh, I forgot the C there, but you get the point. The trapezium articulates with the thumb to make it opposable so that you can hold up only a few fingers at a time so that you can hold water bottles and stuff. And it's called a saddle joint right here. You can tell that this is a palmar view of the hand because there is a hook on the hamate and you can see all of the pisiform. On a posterior view, you can't see the pisiform as well because it's hidden by the triquetrum and there is no hook on the hamate. Moving on, we have the metacarpals and the phalanges. So you can identify each of them by naming them by their number and their position / bone. The numbers will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, always starting with the thumbs as your first digit. Therefore, you can identify this bone as the 4th metacarpal. Up here we have the phalanges, your fingers. This is the proximal phalange, the middle phalange, and the distal phalanges, your fingertips. Therefore, you can identify this as the 2nd middle phalanx. So I chose to talk about the appendicular skeleton, particularly the pectoral girdle, not only because I am an artist and it is notorious that hands are hard to draw because of how intricate their movements are and how they are shaped, because they're very complex structures to draw. So I thought that talking about it would be it would help me draw hands better, and it does. Now that I know how the thumb works, how the wrist bones work, how there are 3 parts of the hand or the fingers, it helps me figure out how the fingers bend and stuff. But I also chose to talk about this because the last thing that we talked about in my high school anatomy class, which was the last class I ever had at high school, was the pectoral girdle. We tried to talk about the muscles that are there, the bones of the pectoral girdle. We didn't go over the pelvic girdle as much, but I distinctly remember going over the pectoral girdle. So it'll sit in my heart. And that's my emotional connection to the appendicular skeleton, particularly the pectoral girdle. I hope that this was an accurate and adequate review.